Ah, very cool. See,
Oh,
we've been around the block
not that
together.
long. No, I'm only 57. Let's see. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I started when I was 17. Yeah, so it's
I'm
been 4 years.
57 too. Yeah, I think I started shooting when I was 15.
Yeah.
But how you doing, man? How you doing under the circumstances?
Oh, fine. I'm staying home for the first time in my adult life. I've never been
Mhm.
idle. I don't have to set an alarm, anymore. And my project, the Photo Ark's come to a screeching halt. But you know what? We're going to stay home, stop the spread of this thing, and it's the right thing to do. And as long as the grocery stores hold up, we're good, man. We're good.
Mhm.
All right.
Let's pick up on that. Talk about the photo arc for anybody that doesn't know it. And again, I want to get into your storied past about being a photographer. But what is the photo arc?
The Photo Ark is a 25-year effort
Hmm.
to document every species in the world, to get the public to care about the extinction crisis. So we photograph everything from ants to elephants, rare or
Hmm.
common, and we try to tell their stories. And for a lot of animals that they're not rhinos, tigers, elephants. They're little bitty mice or sparrows or toads and things that people have never even photographed alive. A lot of them, like streamfish, which are the most vulnerable animals now, are freshwater creatures like mussels, aquatic invertebrates, minnows.
Hmm.
Most people have never photographed them alive. They're photographed in some museum collection somewhere. So
Anybody,
these animals we care about.
yeah, anybody tuning in, go to Joel's website, and he's got galleries of some of the most amazing creatures on this planet that are just so beautifully done. So, just it's a great, great body of work. How did you get into photography? When did you know photography was going to be the thing for you, and you end up as a National Geographic photographer, which is all what we all want to be at one
Right.
point in our
Well,
career?
I had parents that cared about nature, and my mother got me a book of Audubon's actually, uh,
Hmm.
and lots of nature books. But Audubon's work was very affecting to me. You can see in the background here, if you look and see, there's Audubon prints up on the wall. There's also a Cub Scout, a huge Cub Scout
Hmm.
painting over there. I was an Eagle Scout, so I like that.
Hmm.
I saw it in an antique store. But Audubon was not just a great painter, but he was a great naturalist and an
Right.
observer. And he could see in the late 1700s several species that were going to go extinct because of human pressure. And
Hmm.
he painted in such a way that there's a lot of tension there. There's stories being told. He was the first
Sure.
really great natural history painter that did that, that told stories very, very well. So
Hmm.
I was always drawn to his work, and I was also amazed by extinction and how people could drive things to extinction.
Hmm.
So my mother also got me a book when I was 8 or 9 years old on birds, and I think it was a Time Life series, and they had a section in there on North American birds that had been driven to extinction, including the passenger pigeon.
Hmm.
And this was a bird that numbered like 4 billion estimates, were 4 billion, 5 billion birds, and they were market hunted to extinction thanks to the telegraph because people could say, hey, the last big flocks are going here or there. And the last one died in 1914. So I've been amazed that we could doom something to extinction ever since. And
Hmm.
that really set me on a path. I started taking pictures in high school. Got a job at my college paper in Lincoln, Nebraska, the Daily Nebraskan. Worked for 6 years at the Wichita Eagle newspaper, Kansas's largest newspaper, and
Hmm.
then got on with Geographic because I ran into James Stanfield at the Flying
Hmm.
Short Course, and
Hmm.
I think we were in New Orleans, and that's a I think it's a 5 city over a week.
Yeah,
Five
I
cities
used
in
to
a
do the
week.
flying short course. Yeah, I
Sure,
used to
right,
do many
right.
of those. Right.
And and I pinned him in a corner and made him look at my work, and he gave me a recommendation, and that's been like 30, 31 years ago, something like that, for Geographic.
Yeah, if
So,
I remember
well,
correctly, that's the National Press Photographers Association that used to do the flying short course, and it really, really inspirational and educational tour.
yeah, yeah, it was great. It was an amazing thing, and I don't know if they're still doing it or not, but it was fabulous, and it really we I went every year, and it's great for young people, and it really shaped how I saw the world. So got on with Geographic and mainly did human interest stories at first. I did 30 stories over 17 years for them,
Hmm.
all in the field. Lions up in the trees of Africa and macaws flying to their nesting cliffs in Madidi National Park in Bolivia, and you name it. all the
Mhm.
way to state fairs in the Great Plains, to a story on my home state of Nebraska. And then
Mhm.
my wife got breast cancer, and she's fine today, but that was
Mhm.
14, 15 years ago. And I stopped and stayed at home to take care of our three kids. And while I was at home for a year, she was on chemo and radiation for nearly a year. I wondered what I could do that would be different, that would
Mhm.
stick, that wouldn't get washed away with the next month's magazine. And so I thought about the work of Audubon. I thought about the work of Curtis with Native American portraiture that he did. And these guys, they gave their full measure of devotion to one thing over the course of their lives, and we still have that work today, and we revere it. And I thought, well, I've seen so many animals in my time with Geographic that I don't think are going to make it, and yet they live in muddy water or in the soil or high up in the trees. I just There's got to be a way of showing these animals so people can learn about them before they go away. We're not going to try to save something we've never even met. We have to love
Mhm.
it. We have to fall in love with it. So that's how the Photo Ark got started, and we're at about 10,000 species now out of the world's 15,000 or so animals that are captive, animal species that are captive. So it's been almost, I think, 14 years. So another 10, 15 years will get it done.
Okay. And so this has become your lifelong project.
Oh yeah, this is what I'll do till I die. This is it. There are no other projects. I mean, no. I'll be glad if I can live that long to get it done. If I don't, my son will take over for me. He goes on a lot of these shoots. He's 26 and knows how to light stuff better than I do and has a good eye. So he'll
Yeah,
take over, but I have to be
that-
completely out of the picture. In fact, I said, Cole, what if I have a severe stroke? You take over then, right? He said, only if you can't even communicate by blinking would I do,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
he knows that I'll boss him around too much.
Well, we attended an event that you were being celebrated at because I'm going to brag on you a little bit here. You won National Geographic's Explorer of the Year, where I got to meet your family, and that's where you mentioned to me that your family does come along on some of the shoots, which I
They do.
guess makes that distance a little bit closer if you're working together. So I was
Yeah.
wondering if you feel like you can. Now we know you're going to make it because that's what's going to happen. You
Yeah.
started this, you will end this, but it is nice to know that you've got some backup. But you're not going to have a stroke. We're going to
Well,
talk to you
hopefully
about
not.
this hopefully many
Hopefully not.
many years from now, and have a big party when you conclude what is
Well,
an
we
amazing
yeah, we
project.
hope. I'll be in a retirement home soon after, but my daughter lately, with this break that we all have,
Hmm.
she says, 10,000 is a nice round number, Dad. I don't think you'll ever beat 10,000. That's a nice round number. You should stop while you're ahead. I'm like, no, we have to go farther to get fewer now, but there's a lot of species that are really in trouble that need a voice. And we're
Hmm.
we're it, it's a lot of small stuff, and we're really it. I wanted to mention something else that's crossed my mind during this
Sure.
last month at home, and that is, this is really a remarkable opportunity, isn't it? We're all forced to stop and think and maybe get organized.
Hmm.
But I think we'd want to come out of this better than before, like kinder to each other and kinder to nature. And if the quarantines come off in a few months or whatever it is, and we all just roar back to the same place, like where we're at each other's throats, and
Hmm.
we're cutting down trees as fast as we can. Seriously, we can be
Hmm.
better. We can be better than that. I just i just really hope, I'm a realist, but I really do hope that we come out of this with more understanding and patience and tolerance for each other. And
Sure.
that's what I dream about.
And that's why we want to have these conversations with you, because I think that's such an empowering message to all of us that once this is clear, we can't forget. We tend to become complacent from time to time, but
Mhm,
we
mhm.
just to talk about photography, to inspire, to educate. We're not looking for you to sell anything, during this talk. We
Right,
did come to you and say, can you put together 5, to 6 images of your favorite
right.
images? And
Sure,
I bet
sure.
it's kind of hard to cull it down to 5.
Well, I went through, I thought about that. Nobody ever asked me to do that before. And I always say my favorite's the next one, the next species or the next picture. But
Right.
I came up with 5 pictures that I think are a good cross section of what I've done in the past and what I do, and will lead us into some interesting dialogue.
Yeah, I'm going to share the screen in this kind of rough cut
Okay.
interview that we're doing here, where I have a picture that I selected off the web to start with. And can you
Yeah,
see the picture here?
I can. Yep. Yep.
So
that is
you have a love of animals. I know you're a noted journalist, an award-winning journalist, and then you're on this Photo Ark, which is all about animals. Talk about your love of animals and the inspiration and passion behind Photo Ark and
sure,
your
sure.
career.
That's at the Columbus Zoo back in their animal program department. And zoo staffer named Graham shot that. I appreciate him letting me use this. It's a
Hmm.
clouded leopard. You go back into this department and these are the animals that have to be hand raised because the parents, haven't done that. And so
Hmm.
instead of lose the animal, they bring them up and they hand raise them. And Jack Hanna will often show these on television because they're tame, but they get tame by being handled. So I
Hmm.
walked in there to do a photo shoot of a couple of what were they, warthogs, I think, and they handed me this clouded leopard. Said, "Hold on to this for a little bit, would you?"
Hmm.
Because literally they hold the cat all the time to calm him down. He's just a little sweetheart. He's just a little baby. He's kind of trying to
Hmm.
climb on top of my head. Clouded leopards are good climbers, so that's a fun one, isn't it?
Have you had a lot of interactions with the animals that weren't so fun? A little bit of
Well,
a
yeah,
joke here, a jab there.
yeah. In the wild, when I was doing all stuff in the field, of course, you
Hmm.
get charged by the standard, I don't know, the standard issue polar bear and elephant, and grizzly bear, and all that. But those charges that you initiate by accident mean that you were pressing the animal too much. So it's not really something to brag about. It's not good. In zoos, and we work at aquariums and wildlife rehabbers, private collections as well. These are animals that have been born and raised in human care mostly, and so they're pretty cool.
Right.
There's really not any problem. I haven't been able to do a good picture of chimps yet, adult chimps. They're
Mm.
fast and smart, aggressive and strong, and just really haven't done a good job with them yet. We're using animals that are at zoos. They're not trained for show business or anything mostly, and
Gotcha.
so it'll happen someday. But so far, I tried. That was an early shoot I did. I tried using white seamless paper for chimps, and we opened the shift door, and they shifted into a little room, and it was not good. The shoot did not work out. But most
Right.
of the time, the shoots go fine, and yeah, zoos close at 5 o'clock, by the way, and which is really nice. If you're on a shoot for National Geographic, you're working from the time the sun comes up till well after it goes down, usually.
Right.
So it's fine. It's a lot of work, but it's you're pretty sure you're going to get a good picture of that animal if the zoo agrees to it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for pulling together these next bunch of
Sure,
images. We'll
sure.
start off with these bats. It's a fascinating photo. What's the backstory to this? Talk a lot about this
Yeah.
picture.
So these are Egyptian fruit bats in a cave in Uganda, and I wanted to show this for a couple of reasons, several reasons actually. These bats were actually in a cave that was a bit of an arch, so it had light coming in from two directions, which was
Mhm.
amazing. This picture is shot near the opening of the arch, and so there's only light coming in from one direction, but it's very indirect and soft. These
Mhm.
animals are jammed in there, well over 100,000 of them. And this is likely one of, bats are probably, they're amazing animals, and they clean the skies of insects every night. They're important pollinators, but they also are likely the source of the virus. And at least it's jumped from bats to people. That's one of the theories. It
Mhm.
really, to me, strikes home the fact that we should not be eating bushmeat. We should not be eating animals that come from the wild, because we run the risk, especially as people push farther and farther into the world's great forests, we run the
Mhm.
risk of getting something even worse than corona.
Mhm.
So the fact that there's still bushmeat markets open everywhere astounds me, because it threatens all of us. And it's
Mhm.
very hard on wildlife, obviously. With these guys, um, we were walking back to where we were staying after shooting on the edge of this cave. And halfway through the forest, all the bats, it was getting dark, all the bats came out to go forage for the night. And I looked up, and I no longer had my safety glasses on or my respirator. And I got a big, hot, wet guano poop right in my eye.
Mhm.
And that's really similar to being bitten. It's a
Mhm.
wet contact.
Wow.
And so I called CDC in Kampala, Uganda, and the guy there said, "Where were you again?" I said, "Python Cave." And he said, "Don't you know we got Marburg circulating in there?" Now, Marburg is a virus like Ebola, and
Mm.
it kills you quicker. It cooks you basically. You get so hot you die. and he said, you need to medevac home. We've been checking bats in there. We go in there and sample bats every 6 months.
Hmm.
And we found that there's viral load in there always, and Marburg's in there. So you need to get home. And I said, what's the rate of infection? And the guy said 5.6%.
Mm.
Okay, well, he said in the eye is a pretty sterile field, so we don't know what the transfer rate is in the eye. We don't know very much about the disease, but I medevaced home and I stayed in quarantine for 21 days in a spare bedroom in our house. And so
Wow.
it was not very fun, terrifying, but I made it through. I didn't get sick. But I put this picture up mainly because it reminds me to talk about the fact that we should not be eating bushmeat anywhere in the world, and it's just dangerous to push into the last great forest to cut them all down. Besides, we need forests to regulate the rainfall that we get. They actually create rainforests do. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, that's okay. It's an amazing fact, and it's something for us to all take in and absorb. But talk to me a little bit about the surroundings, because the picture doesn't talk about smell. The picture doesn't talk about, what may be coming through your nostrils at the time.
Hmm.
I imagine the environment was probably pretty smelly.
Yeah, one of the reasons I probably didn't catch it is because I was wearing a full respirator. I
Mhm,
was really gloves. I mean, I wasn't wearing a hazmat suit, but there's always viral load in bat caves, and so I should never have gone there. I should never
mhm,
gone there, but my guide assured me it was safe as can be.
mhm.
But I was paying him to take me there, so of course he'd say that, right? My fault. This is shot from the outer edge of this arched cave, looking inward. The respirator eliminated any smells. There were big forest cobras crawling around the floor of the cave, eating any
Mhm,
sick ones or dead ones that had fallen off the roof. Big pythons that were swirling around there too, and these bats. They're talking to each other all the time. I don't know how they get any sleep. They're
mhm.
constantly chattering and fighting, and uh, yeah, it was quite a place, a lot of action, but yeah, I didn't tried not to smell anything. If you're smelling something, it means your respirator's not working. But I had a good respirator, and I had safety glasses, and I didn't get that wet contact or guano in my eye until we were halfway back to the vehicle in the middle of the
Right.
forest.
Well,
Yeah.
it's an outstanding picture, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure.
Let's roll on to this pelican, because there's a huge story here, I can imagine.
Sure. That's the Deepwater Horizon spill. And when that happened, I figured I'd get called. Kurt Muchler eventually called me from Geographic. These birds the oil doesn't, it looks very deceiving. It just looks like water, and they land on it, but it's rainwater or maybe a little water from wave action landing on top of the oil. And so once they get oiled, they can't fly, obviously, and they can't keep their body temperature correct. They can't thermoregulate, they can't preen. They ingest oil as they try to preen and get that off themselves. And it's rough, and this pelican actually made it. They cleaned that bird up with Dawn dishwashing detergent. International Bird Rescue did all the work south of
Hmm.
Venice, Louisiana. It's a guy named PJ Hahn holding that bird. He saved it. He was with the parish, Plaquemine Parish. But I remember getting yelled at for shooting pictures of oiled birds and people doing cleanup. Um, the authorities didn't want anybody seeing this kind of thing. It was embarrassing to them. But it was a huge major spill, and I burn fossil fuel like everybody else, but we're drilling bigger than ever in deep water where if something goes wrong, we can't stop it. And if we open up the Arctic to that, the Gulf, it's hard for the Gulf to absorb all this oil, but it's warm down there and there is some bacterial action on it. But if we
Right,
break off a pipe in the Arctic, it's going to foul the coastline up there for hundreds of years. So,
right.
I've done a lot of conservation stories for the Geographic over the years, and I do believe that pictures can change the world. I totally do, or I wouldn't be working on things like this.
Take us back. You get the call for Geographic to cover this assignment. Can you give us a little insight to how you get prepared, what you're packing, what gear you bring? Obviously, you talked about, the ventilator when you were with the bats. I'm sure there's other things you do to prepare. How do you set yourself up to go out on a shoot like this, and how much gear are you bringing?
Sure. Well, waders and gloves for sure. Elbow high gloves if you got them. Waders that go up to your waist.
Hmm.
Chest waders even better. Um, the oil was staying offshore for a long time. And so we were waiting for it to get to shore because we knew that we could do aerial photographs of boats kind of, they'd hired a bunch of fishing trawlers to tow oil absorbent booms behind them. It's not super effective, but it's better than nothing. We
Mhm.
knew that the everything would hit the fan once that oil made landfall, and it hit the barrier islands first where all these birds were breeding. It was summer.
Mhm.
And so we kind of had to wait. We had to wait for a couple of weeks almost for this oil to come in. And then once it came in, then I went down there. I drove down with my son in our pickup truck, my son Cole. And he basically, he's a not an early riser. So what he would do is he would go out starting at, I would go out for sunrise, and then he would get up and out by midday. And then he would spend all night charging batteries, downloading files, cleaning the oil off gear.
Mhm.
Amazing job. And that would take him most of the night because the gear was so fouled. We
Mhm.
hired a local fisherman to take us out. He had a nice white boat. And I remember we had to clean that off, clean that off every day. And
Mhm.
it was just really, really uncomfortable for everybody. We hated seeing the animals in distress.
Mhm.
We hated knowing that we were going to get yelled at by authorities who did not want anybody to see what was going on.
Mhm.
Um, it smelled terrible. You know, it was just rough. In terms of the gear, you bring watertight bags and slip a bag in that contains. I think I brought three Nikon bodies. Usually, we would use a 2470 for a lot of pictures like this. If I go wider, it tends to stretch things out even more because I always want to go as wide as I can. And then
Right.
I look at the pictures later and I think, God, that's all, anything on the edge is all stretched out and distorted. Why did I go that wide? You know,
Mhm.
28, 35, that's pretty good. Because
Mhm.
remember, you bring the background a little closer, the less wide you are. And you really want to show where you are. And
Right.
so there's an oil boom on the left, and there's other oil booms that have piled up on the shore on the right. And so we really
Mhm.
wanted to try to I don't know, just try to show the scene as well as we can, but and also the other thing to think about too is if I'd been standing up, I had to actually sit down in the oil for this. If I'd been standing up, the pelican's wings would not stand out against the sky. I wanted that cleaned off so you could really see those feathers that had gotten soaked in oil. So
Mhm.
I had to just sit down and get underneath so we could really see most of the bird out of the water like that. I'm gonna
Yeah.
go shut off my heater is blowing right now. I'm gonna go shut it off. Be right back.
Okay. Again, those of you tuning in, we are doing this live in a recorded session, but you know, we're open for everything. Um,
We are
and
supposed to get a, that
yeah.
blower is very loud. We're supposed to get a major winter storm tomorrow with a lot of snow here in Nebraska. Well, not a lot of snow in the eastern part of the state, but it's still
Mhm.
very cold out, you know.
Yeah, well, no, the good news is we didn't hear much of the blower, but you took care of it, and I'm glad you did. And I guess in just closing out with this picture, I'd ask,
Yeah,
I mean, first of all, I'd note the fact that it is amazingly powerful and tells a story. So thank you for making it and
sure.
pointing out all the different things that you did to get it. When you brought up the resistance that you know had from the locals, I guess you just keep shooting because you know the story needs a picture like this.
Oh yeah, and in fact, we were the not long after I filmed one of these spots, the authorities decided to make it a felony to cross over a boom, so you could get
Mm.
close enough to get pictures of
Right.
wildlife. So we stopped. We did not violate that. We stopped. We'd gotten the work that we needed to get, but we wanted to show workers in the oil. We wanted to show wildlife in the oil. And then we also went to the International Bird Rescue's cleanup facility near Venice and photographed them removing oil. Once a week, twice a week, they would allow press in for an hour or two to show people removing oil from birds. And we
Right.
made pictures there too. There's also a sea turtle center that was part of the Audubon Zoo
Right.
down there. And so it was just, there's nothing good about it. There's nobody like that oil spill, not BP, not the people who had to clean it up, not the journalists. It's
Mhm.
just nasty and bad and long lasting. That oil is all sitting on the bottom still. So there's nobody liked it. Nobody wanted it. I just hope that it doesn't happen again. But if you're drilling a mile down with pressures like that, if you poke a hole in the Earth's crust, what do you expect? You know, it's a That's a tough one, and yet we all burn fossil fuel. We all use it. We use it every day.
Yeah.
So it's not black and white. This is the thing I've learned for Geographic over the years is that, you know, you may have preconceived notions, and we all want to believe in good and bad, and people are with us or against us. They're this political stripe or they're that. You know, it's shades of gray. It's life is complicated. The world is complicated.
Hmm.
You cannot bag on the oil companies if you burn oil. If you fly on a plane or you drive a car, you ride a city bus. I mean, we're all in this together. We're totally in this together. And I just hope that people can get smarter about it, you know, because really our future doesn't hinge on a virus. You know, it hinges on whether or not we're smart enough to be better in the long term. You know?
Great point. Okay, so the wolf.
This is a little bit
Beautiful.
about problem solving. I wanted to show this to everybody because problem solving is a big deal, right? We are problem solvers. Good photographers are problem solvers.
Hmm.
So I was photographing gray wolves for National Geographic, and I'd been in Yellowstone for a few weeks and documented the wolves there that had been reintroduced. Not very well, but pictures of wolves in the wild there and chasing elk. And at that time, the pictures are much better now, but at the time there were not a whole lot of wolves, and did what I could. And then we moved over to Minnesota, northern Minnesota, in Ely on the edge of the Boundary Waters Wilderness, had a study center for wolves with like a 2 or 3 acre fenced enclosure where they had a pack of wolves. And we also photographed wolves in the wild there out over the wilderness. We went with a researcher who was doing radio telemetry work to show wolves in the wild just from the air out on a lake at sunset. But then I wanted to do something more intimate. And I thought, well, what can I do? I knew that this wolf center, they would give these wolves a couple of roadkill deer a week. And it was really cold, like 20 below zero, dead of winter. And they usually would feed them very close to where the gate was, which is right by the visitor center. And there was a big viewing window, and people could watch these wolves eat dead deer. So I thought about it, and Geographic has the photo engineering department, and I just talked to him about doing a remote. Back then, now this is 1997, I think. Back then, remotes were a big deal. To get something, I basically called, and the guy's name was Kenji Yamaguchi, famous gear master at Geographic. And I said, Kenji, I need something that can withstand a couple thousand pounds per square inch of crush, something spherical maybe, that a wolf can't get his jaws around with a radio tripped camera that can bolt down to something.
Hmm.
And I need it by Thursday. He's like, okay. So he sends this ball, this spherical ball that a wolf couldn't get his jaws open wide enough.
Mm.
He sends this to me, FedEx in Ely, Minnesota, and home of Jim Brandenburg, the famous wolf photographer, by the way, who was very
Yep.
gracious during our time there. And got a 4x8 sheet of 1 inch plywood, something that would be really, it's super heavy. We might have even screwed 2 of those together. And then we fastened this deer down to the sheets of plywood with hemp rope in case they chewed the rope. It'd be no big deal. It's just made out of natural fibers, and bolted this camera down to the plywood, put it in there. And the camera was right against the edge of the plywood looking out into the enclosure. And I had a little radio trigger and was all ready to fire. Went inside the visitor center, had a hot cup of coffee, all ready to go. And the wolves just walked up and put their heads right over the top of that camera. So their throats were up against the dome and fed.
Right.
I was like, oh my God, now I got to wait till the end of the week because they only feed twice a week. And it was like Monday.
Right. Hmm.
So the next deer was going to be probably Friday. So I thought, okay, these wolves, I watched how they were. I tried to anticipate. I watched. They wouldn't put their feet on the plywood. They would not. They wanted to have their feet on the snow. You know, they weren't used to walking on anything solid. So I thought, okay, this next deer, we're going to put the deer on the forward edge of the plywood, right on the edge. And we're going to put the camera over the back of the deer. And we're going to put that camera out in the middle of that plywood sheet. So they're not going to want to walk on that plywood, hopefully, to feed on the deer. They're going to only want to stand on the snow. So it took one dead deer, to figure out how the wolves behaved. And then on the second one, we got it. Now, this picture is far from perfect. The wolf there, that's the lead female, and she's snarling at the other wolves who want to join in and eat. She's saying, do not come around here until I'm done eating. I'm not done yet. Stay away. So she's snarling at him, and she had nosed the dome. She had sniffed it or licked it or whatever, and she'd smeared the dome. And so it looks like steam or something coming out of the carcass. Fortunately, there was one image where she was snarling where her eye was sharp, and just her kind of bottom of her mouth and her shoulders were blurry, and that's because there was like saliva on the dome. So
Hmm.
we're lucky that I got anything at all, because then the weather got really bad and we were out of time. And but yeah, it just putting that camera, bolting it down to the middle of the plywood sheet, looking towards the deer, was what counted. Now these days, using remotes that are motion censored, this was a hand triggered remote. I was literally watching the scene and then firing with like a garage door opener thing.
Hmm.
Um, but these days, remotes, and for many years now, Nick Nichols is famous for these. Um, the remotes, the animals take their own picture, just it's all triggered by movement. And I've run remotes like that many times too. Um,
Hmm.
but you see some really innovative stuff. The Planet Earth series on BBC, I think, really raised the bar for natural history photographers everywhere. You need to
Right.
be right in the animal's lap in great light with the animal behaving normally, not reacting to the camera. And they're small enough now, quiet, and they're silent. And it's much easier now in a way to be more thoughtful and to get pictures that have never been done before.
Hmm.
Stephen Nam's picture of a wolverine in the wild in Glacier National Park, Ronan Donama's work on white wolves up in the high Arctic. These are things that are firsts. They're all first, and they're gorgeous. And this is really the way that great wildlife photography is made now, is with remotes, where the photographer is not there to sneeze or move the lens or cough or scare the animal through scent.
Right.
So it's a great time to be in wildlife photography, because you're not there. And the pictures are fabulous this way.
Yeah, I
Fabulous.
think always more impact. I'm guessing you're using about a 20 millimeter lens here, or
Yeah,
what lens?
might have been, yeah. It looks like it the way that the foreground stretched out. And again, I
Mhm.
might have chosen a 24 today or a 28, but back then probably was a 20, the way that that deer is stretched out. I'm lucky the wolf is centered, so the face isn't elongated, you know.
It's an amazing story. Again, remote photography is so powerful in wildlife and sports photography. It
Yeah.
brings back a memory for me working with you may know her, Julie Mahar at the Bronx Zoo,
Okay.
where we actually worked with the zoo when Nikon came out with their first iteration of capture software and we could fire remotely, um, camera control rather, to be able to do that. Same thing. The zoo got together with us. We made a hot rock, put some glass over it. And I don't think people understand how, to go back to what you said about that first attempt and it not working.
Right.
We had a tiger come out. It was in a tiger's pen, and the tiger swiped the plexi and the mud with the mud all over it, shoots over, right? You're done.
Right.
Now
Done.
it's reset. And
Yeah.
your heart just sinks because you want to make this great picture.
Right.
At this point now you got to wait for the animals to go away, you go back in, you try to reset everything, and we
Right.
never were successful in making it work trying to get to the computer. But it people need to understand that this could be very disheartening when that first the steam to me, or it does look like steam, so I
It
think this
does.
picture
Yeah.
is
It does
incredible.
steam. That
And
that
that eye
helped.
being
That
sharp,
helped. Yeah,
eye
that
being
helped
sharp
it
is so
too. That
critical,
helped
and of
it.
course the
Yeah.
snarl and the color and everything. So
Right. And
really well done.
to tell you how tough the editors are at Geographic, I remember coming across that frame. We were shooting slide film, and John Ashave was my editor, and he's a very good friend now. But we were just getting to know each other. It was our first story together. And I remember showing him that picture, going into his office all excited. And he
Mhm.
looked at it and he went, kid, if this had been a wild wolf, you'd have something. So I'm like,
Picture.
yeah, these guys are tough. It made
Uh-huh.
the magazine. But yeah, remotes really have changed the face of everything.
Hmm.
I remember Bill Frakes was a pioneer of that with 50 some remotes at the Kentucky Derby. I couldn't even imagine that, because
Uh-huh.
just handling one remote was a big deal. And then for
Mhm.
me, and then I learned how to use, a dozen remotes, or maybe 15 or so, in where was I? In Uganda, working Queen Elizabeth National Park. And Joe Reese stayed on and ran those as my camera assistant. He's now a very successful photographer in his own right. And
Mhm.
it takes a long time to run that many camera traps, but it's very exciting because it's like fishing. I like to fish.
Yep.
It's You're setting the line. You're just going to run those the next day and see how you did. And we would put camera traps at water holes with flash, and maybe on a Cape Buffalo or an Impala, we'd find dad and we'd set that up to see the hyenas or the leopards at night. And it was all very exciting and fun. I like using remotes, but that's done now that I'm with the Photo Ark.
Yeah, I think the beauty of the remote is, like you said, you get back to the camera, you start looking at the images. You don't know what you're going to get. Sometimes you have an inkling. I
Right,
do this a lot with drummers, and to me, the fascination is, man, where'd that picture come from? I didn't even see it happen. So
right,
I
yeah,
love the whole notion of remotes.
right,
Um, so let's move on to this photo.
right.
I know we're coming to the end here, but
Right.
talk
So
about
I
how
wanted to
important
bring
it
this
is.
in because this is, problem solving again. This is the big thing. A lot of times when people send me their work is, we're always looking as photographers, we're always looking for something that surprises us, something that goes beyond the obvious. I remember early on in my career, I was told by editors, you need to go beyond the obvious. Don't shoot the kind of pictures you think we want to see. Shoot
Mhm.
the kind of pictures that you enjoy. And so my assignment was on coal bed methane extraction in the Intermountain West. Doesn't that
Mhm.
sound like fun?
A mouthful.
Coal bed methane extraction in the Rockies, basically. And so I flew out to Wyoming. I did just kind of looked around. I mean, you're either poking a hole in the ground for it's natural gas. You're poking a hole in the ground to get the gas, and then they put a brown kind of a plywood cap over the wellhead, and they have a pipe underground that goes to a collection tank, and a truck comes and gets it. I got to do a whole story on that. I got 8 weeks. Holy cow. What do you even do? So I remember I was driving. I had something else I had to do, and I had to drive about 10 hours on a Friday from the 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 area south of Pinedale, Wyoming, which is very famous for drilling, down to Denver or something. I had all day. I thought, what am I going to do to make something interesting out of this story besides just guys working on drill rigs? Well, there was the pollution issue. And I'd read about it. We research, good photographers, I think, research a day for every day in the field, easy.
Mhm.
And so I thought, okay. And I was driving along the Powder River. That's the Powder River in the background. And the Powder River is named because it's got brown chalky powder in it. It's like chocolate milk. You can't see 6 inches in that water. And I thought, well, this is one of the last prairie rivers that's undammed, and it's liable to get polluted from the runoff from all these drilling rigs. And I thought, how do I show the fish? And the fish are tiny; they're like minnows.
Mm.
How do you show the fish in chocolate milk? And how do you show the river? So I often drive with the radio off because I can think. And so I never turned the radio on, but I did make a couple of phone calls. I
Mhm.
made a phone call to this guy that was head of the state fisheries department. And I said, I'm doing a story on natural gas drilling along, in the Rocky Mountain West. And I'm wanting to work on the Powder River and show the biomass that's there, mainly these stream fish. It's one of the last rivers in the country that has its original complement of native fish. And I said, do you know anybody that's doing a survey or sampling work? He says, yes, we have a crew going out in a month who are going to be using a seine or a net to catch fish. And then they'll keep those fish and put them in the museum collections so that we get a baseline established of what lived in this river. So we can really see whether pollution affects them or not.
Mhm.
And I said, could I go out with him? He said, absolutely. And they'll be seining that river for a couple weeks straight. So you go out with them any number of days. I said, okay. And I thought, well, how do I show the fish in a picture that's not, weren't going to jack with it. We weren't going to Photoshop anything. So
Mhm.
I got home and I had a local window company they made thermopane windows.
Mhm.
I had them make me a couple, like 3 big tanks, like 24 by 30 inches maybe, that
Mhm.
were very narrow. They were making these windows anyway for homes. I just had them leave the long edge off of one and not seal it with gas to give it insulation properties. And so I had basically this very big but skinny tank, right? Where the fish couldn't turn around in it. And then I made a couple sawhorses at home,
Mhm.
had some rubber jawed clamps for the top in case the glass bowed out, it would shatter. and then mounted this to these sawhorses, loaded it with clean water, put some air stems on the sides so that there would be aeration. And then as these ladies would catch fish, I'd put the fish in the tank in a scenic spot late in the
Mhm.
afternoon, up on a little embankment so you could see the Powder River, and the fish just did their thing, and they would kind of swim in a circle along with the water flow created by those air stones, which are out of frame. So that was that. That's it. But to get to that, the picture didn't take long to shoot. This is often the case. Once you think it up, picture doesn't take that long to do, but it's the thought process that took me a 10-hour drive from Pinedale, Wyoming to Denver or whatever. So
Mm.
that's how this came about. But it's not the world's greatest picture, but it's a way of illustrating something that you would think would be impossible in a single still frame.
It is a great picture though to me, and it's very impactful and definitely helps that story, having all the elements of the fish and the river and that creative genius behind trying to, like you said, it's all about problem solving. I used to refer to photography as it's the art of manipulation and problem solving. And
Right.
certainly to be able to do this on an assignment is pretty epic. So very, very
Right.
cool.
Right. When people are doing portraits, Mike, like they're on vacation and they're doing portrait of somebody, and you kind of have the subject's implied consent if they're standing there formally for you at a market and they're holding
Mhm.
grapefruit or whatever it is. Why not move yourself a little bit so the background's better? Why not move them slightly into better light? I mean, why not try to take a little bit of command of the situation if it's not just some candid thing where you're shooting randomly or letting the dance of life unfold in front of you? Why not get them into an area where the light is gorgeous or the background's perfect or both,
Mhm.
and then
Right.
have them pose? Why not arrange it a little bit if it's obvious? And in the caption in this picture we describe, we said these fish are in an aquarium, or
Hmm.
so I mean, I think
Right.
as long as you're honest with readers, or viewers, you're cool with it. Now, it's not cool to mess with something like if you're at a big public event and moving stuff around. No, but
Sure.
if you're doing something that's an obvious fabrication anyway, or
Mhm.
a stiff posed portrait, I think you
Sure.
can take a little bit more license with that in being a director.
And your approach now, I'm going to hold this picture up on screen, even though we'll shift back to Photo Ark, is more of that studio-like setting with
Yeah,
the
that's
animals, so
right.
you have control of the light.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, in this case, I think this was just daylight. This is just
Hmm.
sunlight.
Hmm.
But yeah, where we go now for Photo Ark, it's all got to be lit. Every bit of it's
Hmm.
got to be lit because we're often working in off exhibit spaces that just have a fluorescent light strip, and we want to bring out the true colors of these animals and make them look gorgeous.
Well, I think again, to reveal how you did this and the problem solving, the solution to all of this is pretty phenomenal. I'm going to stop the share and let me exit this and stop sharing. And now we got us both back full screen. That's pretty fascinating stories about some of these images. And again, I know how hard it is. And people come to me, hey, can you put together 5 or 6 images, and talk, well, which 5 do I go to? So thank
Right.
you for that.
Sure.
Real quick though, as we wind down, I always wanted, National Geographic growing up was the magazine, right? If you were
Right.
into nature or wildlife, that's the one you
Right.
want to go. Do you have
Yeah.
any advice for anybody starting out, how they would become, get into that kind of photography and
Sure.
and try to get to where you are?
Yeah, I think that becoming an expert is really helpful, that
Mhm.
specializing is a big deal.
Right.
Everybody likes to take pictures, and everybody's got a smartphone, and it's easier than ever. So everybody loves to take pictures, and a lot of people like to do landscapes and flowers and wildlife a little bit, or great pictures of their families. Um, so what I would say is, if you really want to try to make a go of it and make a living at it, try to become somebody who really specializes in something and
Hmm.
work at that.
Hmm.
Produce great imagery, of course, great videos, of course,
Hmm.
and use high end gear, because the optics will look great. You can get shallow depth of field and really make the subject stand out. You could spend a lifetime learning shallow depth of field and how to use that effectively.
Hmm.
Um, you can really tell the masters of it, people that use shallow depth of field just right. Um, I think you could spend a lifetime just using a macro lens in your own backyard, for example, just in your own yard. You'd never get it perfect. But but the people that I know that have been successful really home in on a subject and they become not just great photographers of it, not just spend a lot of time at it, but they are really experts, and they're who you think of when you want, when you want northern white rhino, you think of Amy Vitale, right? You think of pandas, you think of Amy. You think of elephant work in Kenya, women's issues. She covered a lot of ground, but she really is an expert on this stuff. And because she's given a lot of time. This is the thing, and this is why I think that a lot of photographers don't make it, is because they give up. The people that that persevere and never give up, those are the ones that have not only the best chance, but actually succeed most of the time. So whether you want to teach photography, whether you want to specialize in wildlife, whatever it is, just zero in on something that you're really passionate about, that you love, something you know that you will stick with. Be the person that everybody thinks of as the go-to, the expert who can advise them. That really is the key to longevity. It's a great way to live. I'm really into fighting extinction and in saving the natural world, especially single species profiles. That's what I've been into since I was a little boy, is learning about animals. I was a big fan of great zoos, not bad zoos. Nobody likes bad zoos, but great zoos where there's abundant funding and attention and care. So this just fit into what I knew and what I liked. And that's key. Sticking with it for years and years and just documenting and writing about, if you can, writing about as well, the things that interest you the most. I would say that your odds as a general assignment photographer, or your odds of being somebody who makes it, that shoots a little bit of everything, are reduced now, because everybody can shoot a little bit of everything. Unless you're type A. Type A means very driven. Like as a kid, I could not enjoy myself and go out and play with my friends unless my homework was done. I just could not do it. The homework was a gray cloud over my head. I had to finish my homework right that second. And that's just how I was built. See, when you're working for Geographic or anybody else that's giving you a paycheck, there's nobody standing over you saying, "Hey, are you going to get up at 3:30 in the morning? The light gets good at 4:45. It's summer." There's nobody lecturing you on that, and you have to be driven enough so that you will keep at it. And not a lot of people are built that way, and I wish I wasn't, because it would be a lot more enjoyable being on hiatus right now. But you really do need to be driven, and you need to never give up. That's
I think those are just words to live by. And again, that passion of just, I've heard it before from other photographers. You can't make the picture if you're not there. And
That's
to
right.
have that kind of drive is so important. And we can't thank you enough for sharing some of these stories. As we wind this out, if I were to ask you, what can I do to help the Ark story? Because, the Photo Ark story, because I know that is your thing now for life. What could I do to help?
Well, if you know of anybody that are with a really interesting collection of small animals, rodents, tropical fish, freshwater fish, anybody that's a biologist that has a collection at a university. I'm always looking to work in the United States, and have pretty much exhausted U.S. zoo inventories, not completely yet, but there's still a lot of stuff I can do in terms of native fish, some amphibians, reptiles. If you know of anybody that's studying these or has good collections, I would love to know about it.
Anybody out there listening, pass that
Yeah,
along,
yeah.
please.
Maybe there's some professor that's studying snails that are just in their region of the world. I would love to know about that. And then the other thing people could do is, if they care about the natural world, they need to vote accordingly. They need to vote. This is just, Photo Ark's all about getting people to be inspired to care and take action and save ourselves in the process. We can't doom half of everything else to extinction and think we'll be just fine. It's not going to work that way. So we need a stable, verdant planet. And I would say people need to support good conservation organizations, whether it's Audubon, Nature Conservancy, Defenders of Wildlife. If they've got a great zoo near them that's accredited, go there, spend your money, become a member. They're already breeding critically endangered species. That's a lot of the animals we photograph for the Photo Ark don't exist anywhere but zoos now. They have the last of these animals and are breeding them, keeping them going until time when we can restore habitat. There's a million things people can do, but we're less about promoting the Photo Ark than we are about promoting people to plant a pollinator garden in their backyard to save butterflies and bees, insulate your home. It pays you back big time many times, and saves us from throwing unnecessary carbon into the air, which melts the ice at the poles. You know, we're just a bit kind of a public education project in that respect, and that's what we want people to take away, is that being green is profitable. You can save a lot of money, which means you make a lot of money doing it, insulating and using energy more wisely, and not putting chemicals on your lawn ever to poison things. People amaze me. They go buy organic food and they pour poison all over their lawn. I
Mm.
mean, why would you do that? You know?
Yeah.
So there's lots of things people can do, but yeah, I mean, getting back to me being selfish, if anybody knows of anybody that's, let's say, studying something that's kind of esoteric, something small, we've got all the birds of prey, we've got all the ducks and geese in North America, but we're always looking for the small stuff, the little bitty things that people overlook, because without size comparison, all these portraits, the animals are all the same size on these black and white backgrounds. So it's a great equalizer.
Well, I hope anybody tuning in can help you in this regard. Joel, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us and sharing some of the backstories on these images. Again, I'm sure it's hard to just select 5, and there's probably many more, but just Google Joel Sartore and his website will come up. Check out his website. The galleries on the website are unbelievable. The motion is really phenomenal. But again, thank you for spending time with us, Joel.
You bet, Mike. My pleasure. Thank you.
And for those of you tuning in, we got a lot of content coming your way as we continue to build content that's inspiring and educational for you. So thanks for tuning in to this talk with Joel Sartore. We have others online, so check out what we have up on the Nikon sites. And everybody in this time, be safe. Think about what you're going to do when you come out to make great pictures. And we hope that this content inspires you. We will see you soon.